Hi, magic lovers. Tracy Partridge-Johnson here. I'm sorry it's been so long since I last read to you, but I'm finally back. I hope you've all been doing well and getting along as good as possible during these weird times we're living in. I don't have a lot. I'm not going to say a lot up front. I'm just going to jump into the reading. If you haven't read the rest of the chapters before tonight's reading, I am going to be reading from The Golden Telescope, Book 1, in my Jack and the Magic Hat Maker series. And this, look at this. We are almost to the very end of the book. So I'm sorry that I've left you hanging for so long. But if you haven't done so before now, please do go back and read the other chapters so that you know where we are in the story. And as soon as I'm done with this book, I will begin reading. I'm excited to start reading book 2 in my series. So, The Kidnapping King. So anyway, that will be fun because I haven't read any of that book to my readers yet. So I'm excited to do that. And I only have a very few pages left to read. So without any further ado, I will jump in and start reading chapter 33 to you. Exposed. Stockholm, Sweden, present day. See, I'll move this over here so that you can, so that I can read to you. Are you certain? 2 boys? Inez asked. Yes, Dreadfort replied. I've been watching the house for a couple of days now, and I see 'em out front with bags and all. One light-haired, t'other dark, and an older gent, he added the last as an afterthought. Inez smiled. Good work, Phineas. Keep an eye on things and let me know of any new activity. Hanging up, Inez placed her phone face down on the desk in front of her and began drumming her red painted fingernails on the surface. She sat for a while, deep in thought, until suddenly she picked the phone back up and dialed. I have interesting news, she spoke into it. The boy is at McPaden Manor. Yes, in Ireland. He is with the butler. No, I have no information about who transported him. Yes, I'll report back as soon as we make that determination. Of course, I understand the urgency of the situation. I'll be in touch. She ended the call and sat silently, fuming. I'll get to the bottom of this, she hissed. They are grooming Jack to replace Ethan, that much is clear. Inez was pacing back and forth across the rose and gold geometric patterned rug covering the wooden floor of the music room. Clara sat at the baby grand, playing Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 3 as her sister ranted, her eyes closed, a slight smile spreading across her lips. Are you listening to me? Inez nearly shrieked. Clara abruptly lifted her fingers from the keys, then slowly and deliberately turned to face her sister. Yes, I am listening, Inez. And I think you're overreacting just a wee bit, don't you? She stood and walked across the room to a brass and glass rolling cart where a cut crystal decanter and matching tumblers were sitting. Unstopping the decanter, she poured a healthy portion of the honey-colored liquid into one of the cups and looked at her sister. Can I pour you a drink? It will calm your nerves, she offered. Inez clenched her fists at her sides. I don't want alcohol right now, Clara. My head needs to be clear, and yours does too. We both know how much is riding on this. Sit down and think things through, Inez. Clara walked to the raspberry jacquard couch and took a seat, lifting her legs and propping them up on the coffee table. Ethan has been in possession of his powers far longer than Jack has, and he also has the added advantage of our training and tutelage for the past 2 years. That puts him head and shoulders above whatever wimpy, newly acquired magical abilities Jack might have recently come into. There is no way that little boy could stand up to Ethan and win if it ever came to that. So turn it down a notch or 3, will you? We do not need to worry. She took a sip of her beverage and watched for her sister's response. Inez rubbed her forehead with her right hand. Then, rolling her eyes, she reached up and removed the ornately carved hair stick from the knot on the top of her head, releasing cascades of dark curls which fell over her shoulders. Thrusting her fingers forcefully through her hair and massaging her scalp, she turned to the beverage cart and began pouring. "Oh, why not?" she groaned. She picked up her half-full glass and walked to where her sister was sitting. Flopping down on the sofa next to Clara, she turned to look at her. "This is stressful, you know? And we still aren't sure Ethan will take a stand against his brother when push comes to shove." She took a deep swallow of scotch. "We just need to position him as alpha," Clara assured. "We require all 3 children, so we don't necessarily want to pit them against one another." Inez pinched the bridge of her nose between her thumb and forefinger. "Yes, but the tables have been turned on us. How could we have anticipated someone in the order would step in and alter our trajectory like this?" "That's just it. We couldn't have," Clara said simply. "I mean, we knew there would be challenges going into it. Father, rest his soul, was our biggest obstacle. But you—" She tightened her lips, blinking rapidly, and looked away briefly before continuing. "Effectively remedied that situation, and with him out of the way, we couldn't have predicted this turn of events." Inez sat staring at her sister, who was intently focusing on the whirlpool in her drink as she swirled it in her hand. "I know you're hurt about Father, Clara," she started, "but you know it had to be done. He was deliberately interfering, and all of our efforts would have been for nothing if he had been allowed to continue." She paused, and Clara sat silently. "He lived a long, full life. It was time for him to go," Inez finished, and sat up straight. The moment of warmth had clearly passed. "How could we possibly justify Ross and Faith's deaths if Father had been allowed to ruin everything?" she asked, not expecting an answer. "No, it was a necessary sacrifice for the greater good." She stood and walked to the baby grand piano, resting her right elbow on its top as she spoke. "We are getting so close to achieving our objectives." Ethan stood quietly in the doorway, observing the sisters, when Inez glanced in his direction. She pushed herself up straight, her entire body going rigid. "Oh, nephew! How long have you been standing there?" "Long enough." He paused. "What objectives?" Chapter 34. The Message. Dublin, Ireland, present day. The 4 of them stood in silence. "Okay, first of all," Jack said, but faltered, not really knowing where to start. Well, he simply said, looking down at the parchment on the coffee table in front of him. He shook his head and looked at Bill. I want to know how you did that, but... He stood up, looking at Arthur. That message is really from Grandpa? Arthur, who stood just as silent as everyone else, merely stared at Jack for a few more moments before he finally shook his head and answered, He licked his lips. Well, yes, Master Jack, it would appear so. He paused, his eyes passing over the parchment. This implies that somehow Sir Edward is alive. But where he is? Arthur trailed off, pulling the thin wire spectacles from his pocket. He looked down at them fondly. But to learn that he is the one who sent the reading glasses, clever gent. Bart stood up, backed into one of the stuffed chairs behind him, and dropped down into it. This is just too much, he exclaimed, lifting the ball cap from his head and pushing his sandy bangs away from his face. So apparently your grandpa wants to communicate with you through his reading glasses? He was looking at Jack. That seems clear from the message, Bill interjected, and he also looked at Jack. Well, at least now I know whose eyes I was looking through in that vision, so that's kind of reassuring. He looked at Arthur, who was still holding the spectacles in his hand. Yes, that is encouraging, Master Jack, the butler started, and apparently there is more information he wants to share with you. Once again, he held the glasses out in Jack's direction. Jack looked around at the others with a new look of resolve on his face. Okay, let's do this. But Bart, will you start that timer again? Pull me out if I don't come back on my own within 30 seconds. Bart pulled his phone from his pants pocket and began swiping across the thing, and after tapping a few times, he looked up. Ready when you are. Jack looked at Bill, who nodded encouragingly, then reached out and took the glasses from Arthur. Immediately, he found himself in the same office-like setting where he had been before. This time, however, it was daylight outside. He was seated behind a large wooden desk and, looking down, the hands he gazed at were long and slender, with pale skin that thinly covered his bones. The nails were well manicured, and there was a large gold ring on the right one, embossed with the same initials Jack had seen on the wax seal. E.M.P. That hand now lifted a quill from the surface of the desk and, reaching across, dipped it into a messy-looking ink pot. Securing a similar-looking sheet of parchment with the left hand, he began scratching out a message. Jack, you are in grave danger. Your aunts, Inez and Clara, believe I am dead. They had your parents murdered. They separated you 3 children for their evil purposes, and they have seduced Ethan. I am hiding in the past to protect myself from them. You present a threat to their objectives. You must master your abilities quickly. I will do what I can to help. The hand sat the quill to the side and pushed the chair away from the desk. Standing up, he began walking across the room, past the couch on his left and fireplace on his right, where a rectangular gilded mirror hung on the wall directly in front of him. As he came closer, Jack made out a face. Jack! Jack! Are you okay? 35. The objective. Stockholm, Sweden, present day. Come in, join us, nephew. Inez composed herself and strolled back to where her sister was sitting. Ethan entered the music room, but did not move to join his aunts. Instead, he stared at them, eyes squinting and laser-focused. Convenient that you're able to mask your thoughts, he said, rubbing his eyes and shaking his head in exasperation. However, I can still pick up on the fact that you continue to hide your intentions from me. And I see no reason to trust you with my gifts if you aren't willing to be transparent with me about your objectives. Fair enough, Inez replied. You're right. We have been hiding certain information from you. But that has been for your protection, and also because the information we had was incomplete. That has changed recently, and you have earned the right to know the truth. Ethan crossed the room and watched Inez carefully. Which is? Come sit with me, Ethan. Clara drew his attention. We'll tell you all about it. She patted a spot on the couch next to her. Reluctantly, Ethan strolled across the room and sat down next to his aunt, looking at both of them expectantly. I'm not quite sure how to share this information with you, Ethan. Inez paused, taking a sip from her drink before continuing. As you know, your grandfather held the distinguished role of magic hat maker for many years. What may not be clear to you yet is the fact that there is only one person with that designation on the planet at any one time. She stopped for emphasis. The position is passed on through the male bloodline, along with all of its requisite powers and abilities. Your father, Ross, being your grandfather's only male child, would have been the next in line to receive that designation. But when he died, that role naturally fell to you. Ethan lifted his chin, looking down his nose at his aunt. And? He prompted. Inez held his gaze challengingly. And, in addition to the gifts and abilities bestowed upon the person who holds that position, there is the fact that this role requires training and apprenticeship working under the master. I'm sure that is what Father had in mind when he sent the butler to collect you a couple of years ago. He was hoping to take you under his wing as his apprentice to teach you the skills of the trade. She took another sip of her glass. Well, when it became obvious that you weren't willing to play along, they threw a monkey wrench. When it became obvious that you weren't willing to play along, that threw a monkey wrench in their plans. And now that Father is gone, there is no one left in the world with the skills to teach the craft to another, which presents quite a dilemma. Yes, quite a dilemma, Clara piped in. And this relates to your objectives how? Ethan asked. I'm getting to that. You see, nephew, the designation of magic hat maker comes with all kinds of perks and privileges, not the least of which is direct access to world leaders and people in positions of power, as well as the ability to influence world affairs in your favor, if that is your desire. Inez stood again and walked across the room, pulling aside the damask draperies to gaze out the floor-to-ceiling window. A breathtaking view of the royal palace stared back at her. Turning again to look at her nephew. All of that was destined to be yours, Ethan. That is your inheritance. You are the heir apparent, the eldest male child. But we have recently learned that everything that should have been yours is now being bestowed upon another. She paused, lifting her left eyebrow in his direction. Since you were unwilling to go along with their program, and Jack's magical abilities have recently manifested, someone has relocated him to our ancestral home, Macpayden Manor. He is, even as we speak, being groomed to inherit all that should rightfully be yours. Ethan's face darkened, and he shot up off the couch. If Grandpa Edward is dead, how is it that my little brother has even a remote chance of learning this stuff? That is precisely what we want to know, Ethan, Clara replied, unfazed by his anger. And we have people looking into that very thing for us right now. It is unclear why Arthur has Jack, his friend, and his friend's father staying at Macpayden Manor, unless they believe there is some way to teach Jack, Inez said. They may believe there is someone in the Order of Light who can assist with his training. We don't know, but we intend to find out, because, she locked eyes with her nephew, as you might have guessed, utilizing the skills and abilities of the magic hat maker are central to achieving our objectives. Okay, I'm going to call that good for tonight. I hope that you're enjoying the story. Coming to a climax here. In fact, one of the last chapters is called The Climax. But the next chapter we're going to be reading is Chapter 35, Reality Check. And it will take place in Dublin, Ireland, present day. So I hope that you will join me for that. I hope that you've enjoyed this reading tonight. If so, please do give me a thumbs up and like and subscribe and all the good stuff. And then I promise you, I will finish this book for you. I'll finish reading this book to you in the next, what is today? Is today Friday? I think today's Friday, right? In the next week, I'll finish it for you. Let's see, we've got 36 Reality Check, 37 Climax, and the epilogue. So I think I'll finish it for you the next time I read, which will probably be Monday. I'm not sure. I'm kind of in the mood to read. Maybe I'll read this to you tomorrow. But anyway, we only have 3 more chapters to read. And then we'll move on to the Kidnapping King. Yay! So I'm currently working on book 3, Ross and Faith, and it's coming along slowly but surely. But it's a good one. It's going to be a good one. I'm excited to publish it. I plan to have it ready to publish. I'm shooting for having it ready to publish in time for holiday giving this year. So by the end of, today's October 1st, by the end of this month, I've got to have it ready. I'm also working on a workbook and a companion activity workbook that is designed to help students or children with reading retention, and so I've got chapters for every chapter. I've got sections for every chapter with question and answer, multiple choice questions. Then there'll be like some word puzzles and some coloring pages. So I'm actively working on getting that ready for book 1 for the Golden Telescope. That should be ready for me to publish, if all goes well, before the end of this weekend. So I want to have that available for people to be able to also give for gift giving with when they purchase book 1, the Golden Telescope. So anyhow, I'll be watching for that. All right, have a great rest of your weekend, and then I will look forward to reading to you again in the next day or 2 here, finishing up the story. All right, take good care.